So I retired by the time I was 41. It took me 15 years. And I believe everyone can retire within 15 years doing an ordinary kind of job if they manage their money well, invest well. So that's what my videos are about. And I'm going to speak about 10 different things today that you need to do to be able to retire within 15 years of starting work. And this doesn't apply to people who are on massive salaries. This applies to people who are on average or just above average salaries. I've got an Excel spreadsheet which I share online, which is going to be linked in my bio. It shows you how you can retire with £2 million worth of assets within 15 years, just doing ordinary jobs. So you're starting off at £25,000. So the first thing is learn to understand how to manage money. Keep a record of all of your income and your expenses. You certainly need to do that in your early years when you've got to budget really carefully. Obviously, at a point in time when you've got a lot of money coming in, more than you need, then you don't have to worry as much. But you really need to sit down and write down all your income and your expenses and set a timetable for what you're saving and how much you're going to get to put aside every month from your income. The second thing you need to do is learn to understand how debt works and the advantages of debt. So one of the things we're taught is pay off your mortgages, pay off your loans, don't have any debt. It's really bad for you. So there's a really good book out there, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. There's another book that's called The Psychology of Money. Highly recommend you read these. In fact, I highly recommend that you spend more time educating yourself on finances. It'll give you a different understanding of money. We're not taught well in schools, and the only education you're going to get is, by self-educating yourself or watching videos like this. There are lots of other YouTubers out there who are really excellent and provide so much advice better than me. You take a loan, you invest it in assets, and you will make. So I bought a property for £60,000 in London. The same property now is probably about £600,000, but I sold it for £420,000 a few years back. So I put down £3,000 on a £60,000 house, and I sold it for £420,000. That means I made a profit of £360,000 on a £3,000 investment. You can still do the same now. It's probably more difficult because the numbers are a little bit skewed, but you can still buy a house for, say, £250,000, a 3-bed, semi-detached in a lot of the UK, not London, and you could rent that out for about £1,300 or £1,400 a month. If you were to put down 25%, which is around about £65,000 on a buy-to-let, your mortgage payments would be something like £700 a month. So you'll be making a profit on your rental, and over the 10-15 years, that £250,000 asset will probably go up to about £500,000. The third thing would be understanding the power of compounding. So compounding is where you make some profit in a year, and that is added to the lump sum that you originally invested. And the following year's profits, if they're based on a percentage, would be higher because you've already added your previous year's income. So for example, if your profits are 10% a year, in your first year, if you invest £100, by the second year, you'll have £110. By the third year, you'll have 10% of £110. That's 10% of it is of 110 is £11. So the third year, you'll end up with £121. And so that's compounding. And you've got to understand the power of compounding to realize how beneficial it is for investors. So if you were to invest for 25 years, starting off by paying £300 a month in your first year, and then every year increasing that amount by just 5%, which is maybe a little bit above inflation. After 25 years, you'd have £560,000. So you would have paid in just shy of £172,000 and ended up with £560,000 by the time you were 50. Okay, so the fourth thing is do stuff. Don't just think about it. You've got lots of knowledge. You're being told time and again that get on the property ladder, invest in stocks and shares, maybe buy gold, maybe buy crypto. but you haven't done anything yet, and you're just waiting. You're waiting because you're just a bit worried about things, or you're not sure, or you just can't make up your mind. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't actually take firm actions to improve your life. So buy property, start looking. If you can't do it, then get a company to, or some organization to do it for you. So one of the things we're doing now is helping people to buy properties up here in Birmingham. If you're interested, let me know. Otherwise, if you know somebody who can help you with investing, contact them. Speak to people who have already invested and ask them to help you out. Lots of people are willing to help for free, especially friends and family. They'll give you advice, but you've got to get up and do stuff yourself. No one else is going to do it. Go out there, make some appointments, view some properties and invest, or look into stocks and shares and something like trading 212. It's very simple nowadays. It's not how it used to be back in our days when you had to go out and fill out a form and drop it in the post office. You can go online and buy stocks and shares at very low costs and have, be invested in the stock market within minutes. So get up and do it. Don't leave your money sitting around in a bank paying you 0.01% interest. Use your money and make sure it's working for you day and night. The fifth thing is, don't increase your expenses as your income increases, especially in your early days. So what a lot of people tend to do is when they've suddenly come across extra money because their salaries have gone up, or they've got a bonus, or they've made a little bit of money, they'll spend it on a holiday, they'll upgrade their car, they'll buy something newer, they'll buy fancier clothes. Keep your costs down. Don't, if you're used to living in a 2-bedroom house and you can manage it for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then stay in the 2-bedroom house. Don't upgrade to a 3, 4, 5-bedroom house when you don't need it. Don't go on fancy holidays that you can't really afford. You've got to set aside the money, the extra money that you've got. What it is, a lot of people, they're just not able to do that. They just can't do it. They've got income, they've got 10 grand sitting in the bank. They cannot leave that 10 grand alone. It's impossible. They've got to spend the bloody money, and they'll never go above that 10 grand. So as long as the income keeps coming in, they'll just keep spending, and they've got that 10 grand, goes up to 11 and 12 grand, but then they'll spend that extra money. Don't do that. Save the money and be tight. Save that extra cash and use it for investments. Okay, that goes on to point 6, which is start investing early. So as soon as I got my first proper job, I was on, I think it was £16,500 salary. Actually, properties were a lot cheaper then, so you could do that. But now it's a lot harder. You've probably got to work for a few years. So if you're on a 25 grand a year salary, you're living at home, or you're living with your parents, or you're sharing with a friend, then you should be able to save a fair amount of money. Obviously, if you decide that you've got a £25,000 salary and you're going to leave home and you're going to get your own flat, especially if you're going to try and live in London, you're not going to save a penny. You're not going to save any money. Share a room, get a bed sit. Even though you can afford a flat or an apartment, just get a bed sit in a HMO, or live at home with your parents, and save as much money as you can. In your early years, set your foundations. It's really, really key. Start investing, and all of your spare cash, put it aside and invest it. So that takes me on to point 7, which is buy assets with your income, and then use the income from those assets to save a part of that income and buy more, and increase or improve your standard of living. Point 8 is keep moving. Keep moving house, keep moving job, keep moving city, country, whatever it is, but just keep moving, keep educating yourself, keep developing. We're not taught anything really useful, like how to manage money and finances. What is a mortgage? What are interest rates? I speak to people who are, in their 30s and 40s, and they still don't understand finances. We should have been taught this at school. When you sit in the car and you've got a 2-hour drive, don't listen to music, put on a podcast, listen to, Diary of a CEO, listen to any podcast about finance, about life, about learning, and you'll be improving your circumstances. And keep moving jobs. So some people stick to a job and they're there for years and years and they're not learning anything new. they're not developing their mind, and they are just about content. They get a pay rise every year, which is barely at inflation rates. Jump jobs, move every 2 to 3 years, or speak to your current employer and see if they're going to give you a proper good boost of income. If they don't, move. Time to move. We moved home a lot. We would buy a house, fairly dilapidated, do it up, renovate it, and then sell and move to a new place. Every time you do that, you don't pay capital gains tax. There's no capital gains tax to pay on your main residence. So by you moving into a place, doing it up, and then selling it at a profit, you're actually saving a lot in terms of tax. Right, number 9, this is going to be an interesting one. So this is, don't get married and divorced. This is going to be an expensive, God, I can say, I suppose nobody expects to get married and divorced. When you get married, you think you're going to stay married. But, divorce rates are climbing, and you've got to be realistic about your risk or likelihood of getting divorced. Now it's coming up to 50%. It may well be much higher than that in a decade or so. So don't get married and divorced, or if you are going to get married, plan for how you're going to deal with all your finances if you are to get divorced. You need to deal with it right up front. So that means, either get a prenup or have some kind of an agreement, which is very clear that you're going to follow, or don't even get married. You don't have to have a formal registered marriage in the UK. You can still tell everyone you're married, have a ring, have an event, and say you're married and act married. But what you want to have is 3 boxes, I say: your money, her money or his money, and joint money. So the way I see it is that it's really the man's obligation to support his wife and family. So he should be paying for all the expenses. I know some people are going to say, no, that's not really fair in this day and age, but I mean, that's the way I feel, is that men should be supporting and paying for all the expenses. The women, if they choose to work, should keep all of their income. That gives you women a great opportunity to invest that money in and buy some assets, so that in the event that you do, if you have children and become a homemaker, you've already got some assets which are giving you an income and which are growing, whereas your poor husband's got to carry on working and saving and paying all the bills. So you do get this discrepancy where women are stay at home and they end up being the housewives, where they're not able to earn income. But anything that they do make or earn, they can have a side hustle or whatever it is theirs. So they keep all of it. They shouldn't have to pay towards the bills. But obviously you've got to decide that amongst yourselves. So plan for that when you are going to get married. And finally, taxation. Learn to understand taxation. There are lots of taxes. So you've got income tax, you've got capital gains tax on properties, you've got capital gains tax anyway, you've got it on shares and stocks as well. You need to understand inheritance tax, and there have been some recent changes in terms of pensions, which are now counted towards your assets, which weren't before. That's actually a bit of a killer for a lot of people who are hoping that their pensions were going to be enough for them. They thought that they'd be outside of their inheritance tax limits, but they're not now. Because Section 24, if you're a higher rate taxpayer, you've really got to consider buying property under a limited company rather than buying it in personal names now. If you are not a high rate taxpayer and don't intend to become one, then at the moment in 2024, it's probably still fine and safe to invest it in personal names. And it might well be more beneficial actually for some people to buy it in their personal name and keep it in their personal name. Now, the advantage of buying in personal names is that you tend to get slightly better interest rates. So, for example, if you buy a buy-to-let property in a personal name, you might pay 4%, whereas if you buy it in a company name, you might pay 1% more. Now, you might think that's not a lot, 1% more, but that's actually 20% more interest than if you bought it in a personal name. Thank you. Please do watch and subscribe to my other videos. Thanks.